The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
This is Orioles preview. Orioles rained out last night against the Twins at Camden Yards. They will make it up with a doubleheader today, an actual old-time doubleheader with the first game starting at noon, and the second game will follow 25 minutes after the conclusion of the first game. Orioles with the second worst record in the American League, though they're coming off a series win against the Angels. They are 15-24, and they got to get right. They got to get right pretty soon. It's, as Yogi Berra would say, getting late early, but they got a chance to do that with a doubleheader today, afternoon game tomorrow, and then they open a weekend series against the Nationals at Camden Yards, which is part of Rivalry Weekend. And to talk about that and more is my friend Eve Rosenbaum, who is the assistant general manager of the team. How you doing?
Hey, Andy. Doing well. How are you?
Good. Rivalry Weekend. We've had interleague play for years, not necessarily on weekends. We've already had an interleague series between the Nats and the Orioles here in Washington. What is baseball doing with what they now call Rivalry Weekend?
Yeah, I think it's when you play your natural geographic rivals. So for us up in Baltimore, it's very clearly the Nats. You know, it's only an hour drive between each stadium. And so I think we're trying to get a little bit more of a rivalry going amongst the teams and amongst the fans of the two clubs.
Is there any special promotion for this? Because I'm going Sunday. Do I get like a T-shirt or a pennant or something like that?
That's a good question. I'm sure there's going to be merchandise for sale, which I'm sure my parents, among others, will be purchasing and hanging up in the basement. When you have people who live in Bethesda and are close to both stadiums, they tend to do that. I know we're giving a shirt away on the 17th. Is that Friday or Saturday? I
think that's Saturday. So Sunday's the 18th. Yeah. So okay.
Yeah. So there's a cool orange Camden Yards T-shirt that we're giving out, and we're wearing our all orange uniforms on Saturday as well. So a little way to get some Orioles pride going during this rivalry series.
There you go. And as Eve mentioned, she's local. She's went to Churchill High School and went to a little.
Whitman High School.
Oh, Whitman? I thought it was Churchill. Okay, sorry. And I know they're rivals, so I wouldn't.
Exactly.
I shouldn't make that mistake. I went to BCC. Whitman was our rival when I was there. So, and then went to a little college called Harvard, where she was catcher on the softball team, and now has been a part of the Orioles organization. How many years is this now for you? How many?
This is season 6 for me.
Wow. Yeah. Time is flying by, and. You're part of that generation, which my son was as well, where growing up, right, you didn't have the Nationals for at least part of that. How old were you when the Nationals came to Washington?
I think I was in middle school when they came to Washington, and then high school when Nats Park opened. So, at first it was an RFK, of course.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I was in middle school.
Okay, and so your growing up was the local team was the Orioles. You went with your family to the Orioles, and I'm sure you're old enough to have seen Cal Ripken play during his career. And we haven't talked since the ownership change happened, since David Rubenstein bought the team and Cal came in. So I'd imagine Cal was kind of a hero to you growing up. But what was it like to meet him when the ownership change happened and he became a part of it?
Yeah, certainly. I think like every kid who grew up in Baltimore or D.C. and the whole metropolitan area, we were all fighting for number 8 on our Little League teams. So, it was pretty surreal to go from someone who was a fan of Cal's to then, he's my boss, really, now that he's part of the ownership group. But it's been great. He's around the clubhouse. He pops in to talk to us in the front office. He pops in to talk to the players. It's just great to have him around and just to have his presence and his aura, and for him to, be able to tell stories about here's things that I worked on, here's things that worked for me. It's been really, really great to have him around. Because, before this ownership change, he would come to some games, and we would always put him up on the Jumbotron when he was at the games, but it wasn't a ton. And now it's like he's really back and part of the team. And I think it's only a benefit for the fan base and for the players to have him around.
And unlike a lot of owners, he's right behind the plate. He's in the stands. He's not sitting in a luxury box. He wants a close-up view. And I know that, you and Mike Elias run the player personnel side of it, but how much input does he have into that?
We talk to him, pretty often, whether it's down at BP or just in the clubhouse having casual conversations. It's not necessarily like he's like up here in every single official meeting or phone call that we're having. It's more like when we go down to the clubhouse and he's around, and he was down at spring training a lot, and you could bump into him and just start having conversations. I remember when Gunnar was sidelined during spring training and trying to come back from his injury. I remember having a long conversation with Cal down in Sarasota about, what it was like to battle back from injuries and how early players should report to spring training to get ramped up for the season, how that's changed over the years. So really insight that only he can have, only someone who played, and really someone who played that many games in a row, only insight that someone like that can have that we're not going to have sitting up here in the office just being like, hey, when is Gunnar going to be back? When's he going to be feeling better? So that's been really beneficial for us.
I would think that would be the most ironic conversation of all time, to talk to Cal Ripken about coming off. I know at the end of his career he was on the injured list a few times, but the Iron Man, what does he know about coming off an injury, right?
Yeah. Well, he knows about playing through them and toughing it out, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Gunnar's pretty tough as well. Guys like Westberg, they're pretty tough. They want to be out there, and sometimes it's our job to say, like, whoa, you got to, calm down. You got to take a break. It's okay to have an off day every now and then. So it's kind of things that maybe Cal didn't have to experience. That's part of the new game, the game these days.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking to Eve Rosenbaum, who's the assistant general manager over the Orioles as they get set for, among other things, rivalry weekend when they'll be taking on the Nats in a weekend series. Pete Rose was just, I guess, reinstated by the commissioner yesterday. He's now up and would be eligible for consideration for the Hall of Fame. We've got, betting as a part of all sports nowadays, and baseball as well, and there are, guardrails against players doing it and so forth. You got a lot of young guys there, and even the older guys. I mean, it's been almost 40 years since he played. How much acknowledgement of Pete Rose have you had with players before, kind of a cautionary tale? I mean, how much does that enter what you guys do on a daily basis with the young guys?
That is an interesting question. And the honest answer is I've never talked about Pete Rose with our players. It's never come up. MLB has a lot of formal training for the players to educate the players on. It's called Rule 21, which is the rule in the Major League rule book, not the on-field rule book, but one of the CBA type off-field rule books, Rule 21, about what you're not allowed to do, how you're not allowed to bet on baseball. It goes into more of the details, and it talks about some of the punishments. So we have that posted in our clubhouse, in our spring training clubhouse, and the visiting clubhouse. MLB security comes to spring training every single year and does a whole presentation on it. I usually stand up in front of the players and the coaches and read the rule in its entirety. And we basically say, hey, don't bet on baseball. It's not worth it. And, fortunately, we haven't had any issues here. So I've never had to go into the Pete Rose conversation with anyone in particular.
And I know that players obviously are not allowed to bet on the various sites, DraftKings, whatever, on baseball. But are baseball players allowed to bet on other sports?
I don't want to necessarily go into the specifics of the rule without opening it up and talking about it and, talking to the various people at MLB who write it. So I don't necessarily want to go into the, exact X's and O's of what's allowed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are a lot of cautions and things that players have to be aware of. The team is struggling now.
If you're a player, you've got enough on your mind just focusing on your own game, right? And in baseball, there's no breaks. You barely get any off days, and you get days like today when we have a doubleheader. So
yeah,
I would think if I were a player, I would just be focused on my game and then getting home and relaxing and turning around and doing it again the next day.
Yeah. Yeah, but, they're young and and it's available. It's on your phone all the time. So it is something that you have to caution against. The team is struggling now, as we all know, and you've got injured pitchers. What is the forecast for health, especially for the pitching staff, as we get closer to the midpoint of the season?
Yeah, well, we got Eflin back, which is huge to get our number one guy back. Grayson, Suarez, they're still working through it. We're not exactly sure what their particular timelines are going to be, but they're making progress, that's for sure. They've been up here doing their rehab in Camden Yards the entire year so far, which is great to be able to have our major league staff hands-on with them and to have their presence around the clubhouse as well. I think that can make the rehab process easier if you're around your friends and you're around the team. So they've been up here where they're working their way back. Wells and Bradish, the guys coming back from Tommy John, because that's such a long rehab, that's going to be more like a summer, fall type thing. I don't know the exact dates yet, but they're both making, good progress as well. And I think that they'll really be able to give us a boost in the second half when they come back.
Yeah. And now
Kittredge is, everyone calls him Wolverine. I have to admit, I'm a Marvel fan, but I'm not an X-Men fan. But everyone calls him Wolverine because he heals so quickly. He's already pitching in AAA, doing rehab assignments. He's been ahead of schedule basically ever since he got out of the operating room. So he should be coming back, relatively soon. He's got a few more outings. He's kind of having his spring training right now in AAA. So you don't want to rush that. You want to give him time to get in the rhythm, to get used to pitching back to back, to get used to doing a pitch off pitch, to get his velo up, to really work on his pitches. All those things you normally see guys do for the month and a half in the spring training. Kittredge is doing that right now in AAA. So once he checks all those boxes, he'll be back, and they'll be back relatively soon. I think he'll be a nice boost to our pen.
Yeah, well, you got pitching issues, but then those guys come up. We also have the young players, and we had this last year with Jackson Holliday when he came up and there were issues, and he went back down, and now he's come back up for good, and he's probably through with whatever issues he was having. Does that make you hesitate on some younger players and bringing them up? I mean, do you err on the side of let's make sure they're fully ready to come up before we bring them up?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something I was just talking about with Mike and Sig and Matt Blood, as recently as yesterday. It's something that's always on our mind because there's this balance between you want the players to get enough experience in AAA that they're really ready, and so you want them sort of marinate in AAA for long enough, but at the same time, the only way to get major league experience is to get major league experience. And so you don't want to keep them down too long where you think, hey, maybe this guy's development is stalling or plateauing, and the only way for him to get better is to go to the majors. So we're always trying to find that balance. There's also, potentially the idea that the major league has just sort of has better pitching these days than it has in the past in comparison to AAA. That jump from AAA to the majors is more difficult now than it's been in the past. This is just a theory. It's something that we're looking at. It's something that a lot of baseball people talk about. But in the minors, there's not a lot of left-handed pitching. So how are you, if you're a righty hitter or a lefty hitter, how are you going to get experience against left-handed pitching unless you're in the majors? That's something we take into consideration. And also, if there's a lot of injured pitchers in the majors, which is true for us, it's true for every team. I mean, look at the Dodgers as well. If you have a lot of injured pitchers in the majors, that means more of your AAA pitchers are up in the majors, which means that the pitching you're seeing in AAA is more like AA guys or guys who are kind of, on the taxi squad, the shuttle going back and forth between the majors and AAA. And so the quality of pitching perhaps at AAA is lower than what it used to be. And so that then is a point in the bucket of get the guys up to the majors faster so they can develop against major league pitching. So it's a constant conversation, and I think it's a very fluid landscape and perhaps a landscape that has changed just in the past 4 years with the increase in pitching injuries and how that's had a domino effect on the quality of pitching at AAA. So it's something we are definitely looking into. But ultimately, when it comes to guys like Jackson and Mayo, there's a lot of individual conversations with them and with their coaches. Hey, what are you working on? How are you feeling? How's it going with the defense? Where are you mentally? It's a lot of individual conversations that we have with them.
Very good. Well, the team is now 15-24. We all remember when the Nationals were 19-31 and went on to win the World Series. So you never know how things are going to turn over the next few months. Always good to catch up with you, Eve. Best of luck, and maybe I'll run into you on Sunday.
Yeah, please come by. It'll be good to have the stadium here packed. I do think this rivalry between the O's and the Nats is something that can really get some juice behind it, as both teams are good and full of young stars over the next few years.
And don't hold it against me if I'm wearing red, okay?
Okay, you got it, Andy.
They're good. Thanks, Eve. That's Eve Rosenbaum, who is the assistant general manager of the Orioles. And again, we have rivalry weekend coming up at Camden Yards where the Nationals are playing the Orioles. And I'm old enough to remember when the Orioles used to come to Washington to play the Senators at RFK Stadium. And I guess they probably did play at RFK. I think it was the second year because the schedule was already set. So it would have been like 2006, 2007 that the Orioles played at RFK, but against the Nationals instead of the Senators. All right, we're going to catch up on the Bill Belichick Michigas. A big story in the Post about it, front page. We'll go through some of the quotes on that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.